just to emphasize a few points in a way that I would say are needed to be able to address this issue of the impact of COVID on multilateralism in International Geneva in a, let's say, less anxious and less worrisome way, because the way we talk about it, everybody thinks there's something happening, something probably bad, but we don't know how the world's going to look like in a few months. So I think in order to address these issues, it's really important, as you already mentioned it, to first start addressing the impact on multilateralism and to really distinguish these two different stories, with these two different accounts when it comes to the impact of COVID on multilateralism. Because the first account, I would say, is really at the strategic level. And this first account is, let's say, about this ongoing discussion of the crisis of multilateralism. In a way, does the COVID crisis being the knockout punch for multilateralism in this, context of a few years of this, just to mention a few usual causes, just to mention a few causes, because of the rise of populism, and then this growing opposition, this growing rivalry between US and China, and to make it short, this return to Cold War era rivalry between states, also this idea of a retreat to the state that will, in a way, lower the importance of multilateralism and the importance of invest into multilateralism. So this discussion is going on, and this is the discussion that takes, I would say, the most space when we talk about the impact of COVID. But in a way, it's important here to remind what is multilateralism, because multilateralism is it's a rule-based system. It's the will to create a rule-based system of in the world in order to promote peace and security. But it's also a process that is supposed to bring together all the actors willing to talk about global politics, even if they completely disagree. So having some actors being strongly, against the international organization, in a way, is definitely part of multilateralism itself. So it's true, it's not the best moment for multilateralism.
Stephan?
Yes.
Could you please bring your mic a bit closer to your mouth, because we have sometimes some difficulty to hear what you say. No worries.
Yes. Is it better? Yes. Is it better?
So. let's do it. Let's try it.
Okay. And otherwise, I still have my backup. I will do it while I talk. That would be better.
Oh, that's good. No, that's good. Well, that's always a problem with better. Go ahead.
And so it's a crisis, but it's definitely too early to call for the demise of multilateralism. We saw the example, for example, of the U.S. and Israel pulling off of UNESCO, and some other states really helped the organization didn't collapse, and it's still here. So this back and forth, movements in multilateralism are completely part of the process. So beyond the strategic considerations, that's usually what we talk about first. Multilateralism is also a practice, and it's also a society, because reminds me, there is this famous book in international relations theory wrote by Hedley Bull in the 70s, who talks about an anarchical society, to say that even if the world is ruled by states, these people who are ruling this world, and even if this world is anarchic and these people don't want to create a world government or anything, they still constitute a society with its own rules and its own habits. And so multilateralism is also a practice where it's about just not the meetings, but the sidebars. We talk about the sidebars, but also the informal discussions in restaurants, in bars, in gyms. So multilateralism is really a way deeper space than just relations between states. And on that aspect, this is maybe the second account of the crisis now, of the impact of COVID on multilateralism, because what's happening now, and this never happened even during World War II, because the question that raised COVID, since we can't meet anymore, and even if now the Federal Council announced it's going to be easier to meet, still, international flights and transocean flights are not they're not going to be operational again soon. You have all these meetings, all these hundreds of thousands of people coming to Geneva every year. They are not coming anymore. So the second account about the impact, I think it's really at the operational level, and it's really about how do we operate in such a context. This never happened. So it's the very ability to practice multilateralism which is at stake, which in a way is a newer and a most fundamental challenge than the first one, which already happened before. So now let me move to how these two accounts impact International Geneva. This ecosystem with all these various actors, and Geneva being this bubble of multilateralism. It's interesting to see how it will be affected. And on the first account, on this crisis, on the strategic crisis of multilateralism, Geneva will probably suffer, in terms of funding of NGOs. Some states cutting the funds, maybe some jobs will be lost. But in a way, as I said it before, it's part of the game. There's been crisis before, and something particularly interesting happening now, and maybe this is a good lead to see how International Geneva will adapt to this crisis, is how international organizations, but also important NGOs, are less and less dependent on public funding. And just talking about health, the WHO is just the tip of the iceberg. There's so many organizations in Geneva working talking about and working on global health. You have, for example, the Framework Convention on Global Health, or Gavi, the Global Alliance for Vaccines and Immunization, and all these actors, they depend less and less on public money. So it's also about this ability to move from one kind of funding to the other, which is very important. So in that sense, I think International Geneva will not be totally affected. On the second kind of impact, on this second account about the ability to be still able to practice multilateralism, this is more complicated. And now the conversation that we're having more and more now is how the digitalization could take the place of face-to-face meetings, and everybody agrees that this is impossible. And very often we talk about one replacing the other, but when it comes to technology, there's always been like this with the relationship between technology and culture. It's about how one influences the other. It's not about how one will replace the other. So maybe to finish, to conclude on this first attempt to look at the impact of COVID on COVID crisis on International Geneva, and where maybe these two accounts are going to meet, the strategic one and the operational one. I think the main challenge for International Geneva now is to able to come up with hybrid solutions that could, let's say, find the right equilibrium between this still ability that we know we'll have to meet and how to reach the maximum amount of people. It's about making more with less, and and to put it differently, making every meeting count. And I'll finish on that. Something that it's maybe reassuring to see that we're going the right direction is in the previous years in Geneva, you have more and more platforms being developed. You know, call it the Geneva platform. You have the Water Hub, you have the Internet, Geneva Internet platform, and on so many different aspects. So this ability to bring together coalitions and alliances in order to matter in global governance. So I'm going to stop here. Thank you very much.